The silence in the library pressed against Willa's ears like velvet, broken only by the crackle of flames in the stone hearth and the whisper of turning pages. She had been cataloging manuscripts for 16 hours straight, her eyes burning, her fingers cramped around the ancient tome in her lap. The leather chair had become a nest of sorts, piled with reference books and loose papers, her coat draped over one arm. Outside the arched windows, snow fell through the darkness over what the modern world believed was an abandoned estate on the edge of the city. They had no idea a vampire king lived beneath it. Willa blinked hard, trying to focus on the old French text swimming before her vision. The fire was so warm, the chair so deep, her head tilted back against the worn leather, and the book slipped just slightly in her grip. Just for a moment, she thought. Just rest my eyes. The words blurred into shadow. She didn't hear the door open. Didn't hear the footsteps, silent as death itself, crossing the marble floor. Didn't feel the presence that filled the room like winter frost until pale hands, careful, impossibly gentle, lifted the book from her lap. Lucien Jarnvilder moved with the precision of someone who had spent 5 centuries learning to control every motion. His white hair fell past his shoulders, catching the firelight like spun silver. His skin was alabaster, his features sharp and regal, his eyes the color of smoke. He wore black, always black, tailored perfectly to a frame that spoke of both elegance and lethal strength. He looked at the sleeping woman in his chair, and something shifted in his chest. Something he had not felt in a very long time. She had ink on her fingers, a smudge on her cheek. Her dark hair had escaped its clip, falling across her face in waves. Her breathing was deep and even, her expression peaceful in a way that made his ancient heart constrict. Lucien glanced at the page she'd been reading, an illuminated manuscript on blood law treaties from the 13th century. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a black silk ribbon, sliding it carefully between the pages to mark her place. Then he closed the book with barely a whisper of sound and set it on the side table. For a long moment he simply watched her sleep. Then he bent, sliding one arm beneath her knees, the other behind her shoulders, and lifted her as though she weighed nothing at all. She made a small sound, turning her face into his chest, but didn't wake. The scent of her vanilla and old paper and something uniquely alive filled his senses. He carried her through the library, through halls lined with paintings centuries old, up a winding stone staircase to the residential wing. To a room he had prepared weeks ago, though he hadn't admitted to himself why. The bed was made with silk sheets the color of midnight. He laid her down gently, removed her shoes, pulled the coverlet over her. She sighed in her sleep and curled onto her side. Lucien stood there for longer than he should have, memorizing the curve of her cheek, the flutter of her lashes, the vulnerable line of her throat. Then he turned and walked away, closing the door without a sound. When Willa woke, sunlight was streaming through windows she didn't recognize. For a disorienting moment she couldn't remember where she was. Then it came back in a rush, the library, falling asleep, the book. She sat up fast. She was in a bedroom. An extraordinarily beautiful bedroom, all dark wood and stone walls and rich fabrics. Not her tiny apartment across the city. The door opened. A woman entered, elderly and human, carrying a tray. "Good morning, Miss Sterling. His Majesty thought you might be hungry." "His Majesty?" Willa's voice came out rough. I fell asleep. I'm so sorry. I should go. You'll have breakfast first." The woman set the tray on the bedside table. "He insists, he insists." The woman's tone was firm but kind. "I'm Marta. I've worked here 40 years, and I've never seen him carry anyone to bed before." Heat flooded Willa's face. "He carried me?" "All the way from the library. Marked your page, too. The book's waiting for you downstairs." Marta moved to the door. "Bathroom's through there. Fresh clothes in the wardrobe. Take your time." She left before Willa could ask any of the 1,000 questions crowding her tongue. Willa ate mechanically, her mind spinning. She'd been working for Lucien Jarnvilder for 6 weeks now, hired through an intermediary to catalog and digitize his extensive collection of historical manuscripts. The pay was extraordinary enough to cover her mother's medical bills and her sister's university tuition with money to spare. She'd met the Vampire King exactly 3 times. Each encounter had been brief, formal, and utterly terrifying in a way she couldn't quite name. He barely spoke, just watched her with those smoke-colored eyes that seemed to see straight through skin and bone into something deeper. And now he'd carried her to bed. The clothes in the wardrobe fit perfectly: dark jeans, a soft sweater, boots that were somehow exactly her size. She tried not to think about what that meant. When she made her way back down to the library, following half-remembered turns through the vast estate, she found the book waiting exactly where Marta had promised. On the side table beside the leather chair, the black silk ribbon still marking her place. Willa picked it up, running her fingers over the ancient binding. Something warm unfurled in her chest. "You slept 4 hours." She spun around. Lucien stood in the doorway, backlit by the hall lights, looking like something from a painting. A very dangerous painting. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to. You've been working 16-hour days for a week." His voice was low, quiet, with the faint accent of someone who'd learned English centuries after his native tongue. You needed rest. I have a deadline. The deadline is arbitrary. He moved into the room with that unnatural grace. I said it. I can extend it. Willa clutched the book to her chest. I don't want special treatment. You want to collapse from exhaustion instead? For the first time, something like emotion flickered across his face. That would be foolish. I'm not foolish, no. He stopped a few feet away, studying her. You're dedicated, brilliant, thorough. You've found connections in these texts that scholars missed for centuries. He paused. But you're mortal. You have limits. The word mortal hung in the air between them. Thank you, Willa said softly. For the bed, the clothes, the ribbon. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. You're welcome. He turned to leave. Wait, the word came out before she could stop it. The book I was reading, the blood law treatise, there's a section I couldn't translate. Old French mixed with something else. Would you mind? Lucien turned back. Show me. They spent the next 2 hours bent over the manuscript together, his voice quiet and steady as he translated passages written before her ancestors were born. He stood close enough that she could feel the cold emanating from his skin, close enough that she could see the way the firelight caught in his white hair. He smelled like winter and old books and something indefinably ancient. Here, his finger traced a line of text. This is the Treaty of 1317, the clause that ended the war between the northern and southern courts. The war that killed thousands, Willa murmured, remembering her research. Yes. His jaw tightened. I was there. Of course he was. He would have been young by vampire standards, but alive. Fighting, maybe. Bleeding. She looked at his profile, trying to imagine him in armor covered in blood that wasn't his own. This section, she pointed to another paragraph. Is this about contested territory? Blood rights, feeding grounds. He leaned closer, reading. This is the original compact, the document that established modern vampire law. It's beautiful, Willa breathed. The language, I mean. The structure of it, it's a cage. Lucien's voice was soft, almost too soft, necessary, but still a cage. She looked up at him. Their faces were inches apart. His eyes were the color of smoke, and they were looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Lucien, he stepped back abruptly. You should rest. More work tomorrow. And he was gone, leaving her standing alone by the fire, her heart pounding against her ribs. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm. Willa arrived each morning, worked through the vast collection, cataloging and translating and photographing pages. Lucien appeared sporadically, sometimes for hours, sometimes just for minutes. They talked about the manuscripts, about history, about the intricate politics of vampire society that she was only beginning to understand. They never talked about the night he carried her to bed, about the ribbon, about the way his eyes followed her when he thought she wasn't looking. But the chair by the fire became theirs. He brought her tea, remembering exactly how she took it. She started leaving notes in the margins of her work logs, little observations or questions, and he responded in his elegant script. Small conversations carried out in ink. Her phone rang one evening while she was cross-referencing dates. She glanced at the screen, saw her sister's name, and her stomach dropped. I need to take this, she said to the empty room. Lucien had been there an hour ago, but had vanished as he often did. Willow? She stepped into the hallway. What's wrong? Mom's doctor called. Her sister's voice was tight with stress. They want to try a new treatment, but insurance won't cover it, and it's Willa. It's $30,000. The world tilted. $30,000, I know. I'm trying to figure out student loans, maybe a second job, but I'll handle it. The words came automatically, even as her mind raced. Don't worry about it. Willa, you can't. I said I'll handle it. I have to go. She ended the call and leaned against the stone wall, fighting the urge to scream. The job paid well, but not that well. And she'd already burned through her savings covering bills from the last hospital stay. Her phone buzzed. A text from the number that had originally hired her, the intermediary she'd never met in person. We need to discuss additional compensation for special services. Are you interested? Willa stared at the message. Additional compensation. She typed back with shaking fingers. What kind of services? The response came immediately. Nothing that would harm anyone. We simply need you to locate a specific document in the collection. A treaty from 1317. We'll pay $50,000. $50,000. Enough for the treatment and then some. Enough to breathe. What do you want with the treaty? Academic research. Historical verification. Nothing nefarious, Miss Sterling. Just information that's been lost to time. She should have asked more questions. Should have been suspicious. But her mother's face swam before her eyes. Pale and tired in a hospital bed. I'll look for it. She found the document 2 weeks later, buried in a collection of financial records from the 14th century. It was smaller than she expected, just 3 pages of cramped text, but the moment she saw the date and the seals at the bottom, she knew this was what they wanted. Willa photographed it carefully, her hands steady despite the nausea churning in her stomach. Then she kept working, cataloging the surrounding documents, acting as though nothing had changed. That evening, Lucien found her in the library again. She'd been reading by the fire, trying to lose herself in a manuscript about medieval poetry, trying not to think about what she'd done. "You're distracted." He sat in the chair opposite hers. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." The lie tasted bitter. "Just tired, Willa." He leaned forward, his pale eyes searching her face. "Tell me." For a wild moment she almost did, almost confessed everything, the money, the treatment, the photograph hidden on her phone. But fear held her tongue, fear of what he'd do, fear that he'd look at her differently, fear that this fragile thing between them would shatter. "My mother's sick," she said instead. "It's expensive." Understanding flickered in his expression. "I can help." "No." The word came out too sharp. I'm not asking for charity." "It wouldn't be charity." His voice was quiet. "It would be me taking care of something I value." Her heart stuttered. "Something? Someone?" He held her gaze. "You must know by now, Willa. You must see." She couldn't breathe. "See what?" Lucien stood and crossed to her chair, moving with that predatory grace. He knelt beside her, bringing them eye to eye, close enough that she could count the silver flecks in his irises. "I'm 537 years old," he said. "I've lived through wars and plagues and the rise and fall of empires. I've been alone for most of it by choice. I'm not easy to know, I'm not warm, I'm not gentle by nature." His hand came up, hovering near her cheek but not quite touching. "But you fell asleep by my fire and I marked your page. I carried you to bed, I make you tea, I watch you work and feel something I thought was gone from me." His eyes burned. "You must see." "Lucien." Her voice broke on his name. "I'm falling in love with you." Simple words, devastating. "I have been for weeks, and I don't know what to do about it." Willa reached up and caught his hand, pressing it to her cheek. His skin was cool against her warmth. "I love you too," she whispered. "But I'm so scared. Of me? Of losing you, of being mortal while you're forever. Of all of it. Then we'll be scared together." He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. "Is that acceptable?" she answered by closing the distance and kissing him. His lips were cool, but they warmed under hers. He made a sound low in his throat and deepened the kiss, one hand sliding into her hair, the other spanning her waist. She tasted like tea and honey and life. He tasted like winter and eternity and promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Willa rested her forehead against his. "I need to tell you something," she started. The library door burst open. A vampire stood there, tall and white-skinned with silver hair bound back, dressed in clothes that screamed wealth and power. Not Lucien, but similar enough to be kin. Behind him, two others guards by the look of them. "Cousin." The vampire's voice dripped contempt. "How domestic." "Playing with your food?" Lucien was on his feet in an instant, positioning himself between Willa and the intruder. "Dorian, you weren't invited." "I don't need invitation to my own family's territory." Dorian's eyes flickered to Willa. "Is this the little human you have cataloging our secrets? Careless of you. Get out." "I think not." Dorian smiled, showing fangs. "We have business to discuss. The Treaty of 1317, for instance. I understand you have the original document here." Willa's blood turned to ice. Lucien went very still. "What treaty?" "The one with the clause about contested succession." Dorian stepped further into the room. "The one that says if the ruling monarch fails to maintain order, a challenge can be issued, a duel to the death. Winner takes the throne." "That treaty was never ratified," Lucien said flatly. "It was a draft, but it exists, and it bears the seals of both courts, which means it has weight." Dorian's smile widened. "All I need is proof it exists, Lucien. Proof that you've been hiding it all these years. Then I can call for a formal investigation, drag it out for decades, destabilize your authority. Maybe even get that duel after all. You'll never find it." "Oh, I think I will." Dorian looked directly at Willa. "My associate has been very helpful." Understanding crashed through her like a wave. The intermediary, the job, the money. It had all been Dorian. She'd been working for the enemy the entire time. "No." The word ripped from her throat. "I didn't know." "I swear I didn't." "Didn't what?" Lucien's voice was dangerously soft. "What did you do, Willa?" She couldn't look at him. "He hired me, through a proxy. He asked me to find a treaty from 1317. I didn't know what it was for. My mother needs treatment, and they offered money." The silence was suffocating. "Did you find it?" Lucien asked. "Yes." Tears burned her eyes. "I took photos, but I didn't send them yet. I swear I didn't." "How convenient," Dorian purred. "Shall I take custody of Miss Sterling, cousin? I'm sure we can come to an arrangement about those photos. Touch her, and I'll rip your head from your shoulders." The words were utterly calm, utterly certain. Guards. 4 more vampires materialized from the shadows. Lucien's guards, Willa realized. He'd known, he'd been ready. "This isn't over," Dorian snarled. "It is for tonight. Leave my territory, don't come back." Dorian and his guards retreated, but the promise of violence hung thick in the air. The moment the doors closed behind them, Willa collapsed back into the chair. "I'm sorry." The words tumbled out. I'm so sorry, I didn't know it was him. I didn't know what the treaty meant. I just needed the money and I thought it was just academic research and I'm so stupid. Stop. Lucien crouched in front of her again. Breathe, you should throw me out. Call the police. Something. I betrayed you. Did you send the photos? No. Why not? Willa looked at him through tears. Because I fell in love with you. Because I couldn't do that to you. I was going to tell you tonight, I swear. I was trying to find the courage. Show me your phone. She pulled it out with shaking hands, unlocked it, handed it over. Lucien found the photos immediately, studied them in silence. Then he did something she didn't expect. He deleted them. You're not sending these to anyone, he said. You're not working for Dorian anymore. Understood? But the money, I'll handle your mother's treatment. He held up a hand when she started to protest. Not charity. A loan if you prefer. We'll draw up papers. You can pay me back over 1,000 years if you want. I don't care. His eyes burned into hers. I won't let you sacrifice yourself for this. Why? The question came out broken. I lied to you. I betrayed you. You were trying to save your family. He cupped her face in both hands. I understand that. I would have done the same. His thumb brushed away a tear. You didn't know what Dorian wanted. You didn't send the photos. So you chose me in the end. That's what matters. I don't deserve this, she whispered. Don't deserve you. That's not your decision to make. He kissed her forehead gently. But we have a problem now. Dorian knows you found it. He'll come back with legal pressure, try to force you to testify that the document exists. He'll use you against me. Fear spiked through her. What do we do? Lucien stood, pacing to the fire. For a long moment he stared into the flames. Then he turned back, his expression resolved. Where is the original document in the 14th century collection? Third shelf, red leather binding. Get it for me. Willa rose on shaking legs and found the document exactly where she remembered. The 3 pages felt impossibly heavy as she carried them back to Lucien. He took them carefully, studying the text one more time. Then he walked to the fireplace. Wait. Willa grabbed his arm. That's a historical artifact. It's 500 years old. You can't. I can. He looked at her. This is a weapon, Willa, as long as it exists. Dorian can use it against me, against us, against the stability of both courts. His jaw set. I've spent centuries maintaining peace. I won't let this destroy it. But destroying history, I'm making history. He gave her a look that was almost a smile. Besides, I was there when it was written. I remember every word. If someone needs to know what it said, they can ask me. Before she could argue further, he tossed the pages into the fire. They caught immediately, curling and blackening, the ancient ink running like blood. Within seconds, there was nothing left but ash there. Lucien turned back to her. No document, no case. Dorian can claim anything he wants. Without proof, it's just rumor. Willa stared at the fireplace, feeling something huge shift in her chest. You just destroyed the only copy, yes, because of me, because of us. He pulled her against him, wrapping her in his arms. Because some things matter more than history, more than artifacts, more than 500-year-old grudges. She buried her face in his chest, inhaling that scent of winter and books. What happens now? Now I make some calls. Transfer funds. Your mother gets her treatment within the week. His hand stroked through her hair. We deal with the paperwork, the loan. Whatever you need to feel like this is fair, and Dorian will rage for a while. But he has no ground to stand on anymore. Lucien tipped her face up. He can't hurt you now. I won't let him. You're very protective, she murmured. I'm a vampire king. It's my nature to guard what's mine. His eyes held hers. Are you mine, Willa Sterling? Her heart hammered. Are you mine? Lucien Jarnvelder? For as long as you'll have me. He kissed her softly. Which I hope is a very long time. I'm mortal, she reminded him. I have maybe 60 years if I'm lucky, then we'll make them count. Another kiss, deeper this time, and when you're ready, if you want it. There are ways to extend a life, to cross the line, but that's your choice, years from now. No pressure. Willa pulled back enough to search his face. You'd turn me if you wanted. His expression was serious. I'd never force it, never pressure. But if someday you decided you wanted forever with me, I would give it to you. Tears spilled down her cheeks again, but this time they were different. Lighter. I think I might want that. Someday. He smiled, a real smile this time. I can wait for someday. I'm very patient. She laughed wetly. You're ridiculous. I'm in love. He kissed her tears away. Come, let me make those calls. Let me fix this. He led her to his private office, a room she'd never seen before. Wood and leather and computer equipment that looked absurdly modern against the medieval architecture. He sat her in a chair, draped his jacket over her shoulders, and spent the next 2 hours on the phone. Willa watched him work, watched him command respect from doctors and hospital administrators and what sounded like vampire accountants. Watched him arrange everything with the same quiet authority he brought to ruling a kingdom. When it was done, he turned to her. The treatment is scheduled for Monday, all costs covered. I've set up an account for ongoing care. Your sister's tuition is paid through graduation. Lucy, not charity. His voice was firm. Consider it hazard pay for putting up with Dorian's manipulation, for being caught in vampire politics, for sleeping in my library and letting me fall in love with you." Willa stood and crossed to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Thank you doesn't feel like enough. Thank you is perfect." He held her close. "Stay with me tonight, not in the guest room. Here," she looked up at him. "Here, in my bed, in my arms, just sleep." His fingers traced her cheek. "I want to wake up with you. I want to bring you tea and watch you work and mark your page when you fall asleep reading. I want every small domestic thing I can have." "That sounds perfect," Willa whispered. So they went upstairs together, to his private chambers deep in the heart of the estate. The bed was enormous, draped in black silk, and when she climbed under the covers beside him, the world finally felt right. Lucien pulled her against his chest, his cool skin gradually warming from her body heat. "Sleep," he murmured. "I'll keep watch." "You always do," she said, already drifting. The last thing she felt was his lips pressing against her hair. The next weeks passed in a blur of change. Willa's mother started treatment and responded beautifully. Her sister called in tears of gratitude. Dorian made noise at court but found no traction without evidence. The library work continued, but now it was different. Now it was theirs together, a shared project rather than a job. Now it was home. Willa moved into the estate officially after a month. Her tiny apartment had always been temporary anyway, a place to sleep between shifts and worry. This was different. This was stone walls and fireplaces and a vampire king who brought her tea exactly how she liked it. This was love. They fell into rhythms. Mornings spent cataloging while Lucien handled correspondence. Afternoons discussing translations in history and the intricate web of vampire politics. Evenings by the fire, reading together in comfortable silence. Nights wrapped in each other's arms, learning every curve and preference in secret. 6 months after the night she almost betrayed him, Willa fell asleep reading in the library again. She didn't mean to, but the fire was warm and Lucien's shoulder was comfortable and the book was boring. She woke to find herself being carried. Again she mumbled against his chest. Again she could hear the smile in his voice. "You have terrible sleeping habits. Your chair is too comfortable. I'll get you an uncomfortable chair. Don't you dare." She looped her arms around his neck. "Did you mark my page?" "Of course." He nudged the bedroom door open with his shoulder. "Black silk ribbon. Same one as the first time." "Sentimental," she teased. "For you." He laid her gently on the bed, their bed now. "Always for you." Willa pulled him down beside her, tangling their legs together. "I love you. I love you too." He kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. "Sleep now. Will you read to me?" So he did, his voice low and steady, reading poetry in languages she didn't understand but loved the sound of. She drifted off with his words washing over her, his fingers in her hair, his body wrapped around hers. A year later, on the anniversary of the night he first carried her to bed, Lucien took her back to the library. The same chair, the same fire, but this time he knelt beside her on purpose. "Willa Sterling." His voice was steady but his eyes burned. "I've marked your page 100 times now. Carried you to bed more times than I can count. Made you tea every morning. Watched you bring light into my darkness." He pulled a box from his pocket. "I want to keep doing those things for the rest of your life. However long that is, however you want it to be." He opened the box, revealing a ring, silver and sapphire, old and beautiful. "Will you marry me?" Willa's breath caught. "Yes, yes, of course yes." He slid the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms. They stayed there by the fire, holding each other until she started to laugh. "What?" he asked. "I'm going to fall asleep here again eventually. You know that, right? I'm counting on it." He kissed her temple. "I like carrying you to bed. It's become tradition, such a romantic tradition. The best kind." He stood, pulling her up with him. "Come, let me show you something." He led her to a section of the library she'd never fully explored. Pulled a book from the shelf, not a book at all, but a lever and a door swung open in the wall. Beyond was a room Willa had never seen. Small and circular, lined floor to ceiling with empty shelves. "What is this?" she asked. "Your library." Lucien stepped inside. "For your books, your research, whatever you want to fill it with." He turned to her. "I thought you might want your own space, connected to mine but separate." "Yours." Tears pricked her eyes. "You built me a library?" "I had it built. There's a difference." He pulled her inside, showing her the details, the desk carved with her initials, the window overlooking the garden, the fireplace that matched the one in the main library. "Do you like it?" "I love it." She threw her arms around him. "I love you so much." "Good." He held her close. "Because you're stuck with me now, for better or worse, for mortal years or immortal ones. Your choice." Willa pulled back enough to look at him. "I think I want forever with you. Not now, not yet. But someday," he agreed. "When you're ready, no rush." They stood in her new library, in the space he'd created just for her, and Willa felt something settle deep in her soul. This was home, this was family, this was everything she'd never known she wanted. "Take me to bed," she whispered. "Are you going to fall asleep reading first?" he teased. "Probably," she grinned. "You'll just have to carry me again. Always." He kissed her deeply, always and forever. So he did years later, when people asked how they'd met. Willa would smile and say she'd fallen asleep in his library and he'd marked her page. It was simple but true. The beginning of everything. Lucien would add that she'd stolen his heart one translated manuscript at a time and that he'd never wanted it back. They were married in the library, surrounded by books and history and the fire that had witnessed their beginning. Vampire and human, king and cataloguer, two souls that fit together perfectly despite all logic. Willa kept her mortality for 5 years before deciding she wanted forever. The transformation was hard but worth it, with Lucien holding her through every painful moment, whispering promises and love. When she woke with white hair and pale skin and eternity stretching before her, his face was the first thing she saw. "Hello, my queen," he murmured. "Hello, my king." They had centuries ahead of them now. Time to read every book in the collection twice. Time to catalog new acquisitions and argue about translations and fall asleep by the fire together. Time for him to carry her to bed again and again and again, marking her page with that same black silk ribbon, treating her like something precious every single time. And they did. For hundreds of years they did exactly that. In the library where it all began, by the fire that had witnessed their love story, they built a life together that was quieter than fairy tales but infinitely more real. They worked side by side, ruled together with wisdom and compassion, and every single night he carried her to bed whether she'd fallen asleep or not, just because he could. Just because he loved her. Just because some traditions were too perfect to break. And Willa, who had once been a struggling human taking a job to save her family, now stood as vampire queen beside the king who had marked her page and changed her life forever. They lived happily, deeply, eternally together, not in spite of their differences, but because of them. Two halves of a whole, forever intertwined, forever in love, forever marking each other's pages and carrying each other home.